talking about my presentation on the role of PCSK9 inhibition and reduction in the risk of cardiovascular events. If we look at epidemiological observational data, the higher your LDL cholesterol, non-HDL, ApoB, and these are all atherogenic lipoproteins, the higher the risk of cardiovascular disease. And these are the most important lipids. So if they increase your risk, then the question has always been that if we lower these, can we reduce the risk of heart attacks and strokes? And we have a number of interventions. Most people know the more successful ones like statins, but there have been other interventions like ileal bypass, bile acid absorption inhibitors, diet, for example, and they all reduce LDL cholesterol. And if you look at the relationship between the percentage reduction with any of these treatments and risk of cardiovascular events, the more we lower LDL cholesterol, the more we reduce cardiovascular risk. Now, where some of these interventions appear to be unsuccessful, the reason behind that may be that these are very weak or modest interventions. So this is why we've largely only really had statins as our main treatment. But clearly there's a relationship between the more you reduce cholesterol and risk. So moving on from that, we have evidence now from the Improve It trial that lowering LDL cholesterol further with a non-statin further reduces clinical risk in people with heart disease. So we have evidence now for not just statins, for another intervention that reduces LDL by 20% and will reduce clinical events. So the real question now is with drugs that are even more powerful, the PCSK9 inhibitors, where LDL cholesterol is reduced by as much as 50%, can we reduce risk further? So we've done some analyses, and there's been 2 studies published in randomized trials from Odyssey long-term and also from the OSLA program, showing that in these trials, these treatments that reduce LDL by 50% reduce clinical events by 50%. But those are based on relatively small numbers of events, and more recently what we've done is an analysis of the entire Odyssey trial program. And this compared alirocumab against placebo or alirocumab against ezetimibe. And we have over 104 events. And what we looked at is the relationship between on-treatment LDL and risk of events. And we found a continuous relationship, meaning the lower your on-treatment LDL, the lower your risk, all the way down to LDLs as low as 25 milligrams per deciliter. So we didn't find any risk associated with these low LDL levels either. And for every 39 milligrams per deciliter difference, we found a 24% further risk of clinical events. And this is consistent with the cholesterol treatment trial, this meta-analysis. When we looked at percentage reduction, again, we found the greater the percentage reduction, the lower the risk of clinical events. And it's a continuous relationship, and it's not curvilinear, it's continuous, it's a straight line. When you look at what a further 50% reduction will give you, it actually gives you a 29, nearly 30% reduction in clinical events. So what these data show us is that further reductions in LDL cholesterol, whether it be on treatment levels or percentage, should reduce clinical events, and these will be tested in the large outcome trials like Odyssey Outcomes.